Hello, welcome back. So I've gone through the scene and cleaned it up and made a few changes. So I'm going to do a brief recap of what's different from the previous video, and then show you the where we're at in terms of the result and the look. For starters, I actually ended up. I'll just go through this. I changed the density of the volume simulation to use volume scatter. So if I show you what happens here, before I had it on surface, which automatically takes the velocity, but if you fill the entire sphere, which is what I wanted to do just to make sure there was no gap in the middle for the volume sim, I had to attribute transfer the velocity back onto the scattered points. So that's the only change there. And then I actually didn't change any of the settings in the volume sim. I just left those the same. I've ended up locking the scatter. I was getting some strange cooking where Houdini would re-cook the scatter while I was trying to move the noise around, so I've just locked it in case that comes up again. Not sure why that was happening. So most of this you've seen. What I've done is I've put down a point replicate after the scatter, so that because I locked this off, so we don't need to compute that at all. And for one pop sim, I can have more points than another one. Let me show you just what I mean exactly. So here I've got the same points, and at the moment I'm not even increasing the amount of points. This one is the same as the scatter, and then this one has 10 times the amount of points. So it gets a little bit more full. So I'll show you why I've done that in more detail when I show you the results. Here's the noise I had before. Just made a few tweaks. And then, I guess most importantly, what I have done is before the pop sim, I've just put down a switch and a null. So at frame 70, .f greater than 70, it switches to the null, just to stop sourcing particles into the stop. So I did that based on when I thought the portal should be dissipating. So in this case, if we look at the character, he hits the ground, and then I expect as he comes to a rest, the portal will do whatever it needs to do there. So I've just plugged that whole switch into all three of my sources. Inside here, I did end up in the first PubNet. Let me cancel this. Basically, it's busy cooking on frame 1 because I've set the volume sim to start at -20 and the PubNet as well. Just because I don't want any time to wait here. So once we're looking at the ropped out point cloud, I'll have a solid sim. And what I want to do is in SOPs after the sim try and make that moment that the portal sort of unwraps from nothing. I still want points there, so that saves me trying to do anything awkward with the sourcing. So we just have points now from frame 1, and we'll worry about it in SOPs afterwards, how they appear. So let me just set this pop back to 1. And if I go in here, this was the pop that was maintaining some flatness to the simulation, and this was the pop fluid I was playing with. So one thing I did find is you obviously start to see much more results with the more particles you had, and like I said before, the particle separation is highly dependent on the amount of points. So this is actually too high here. Basically what I've done is I have the scatter set to, is that 200,000? And then I think if I changed this, but I found that a good value where I started to see an actual pop fluid reaction in the solver was 0.005, which is pretty small, I think. For now, I'm going to put this back up. This is my sort of testing number, and so we can see what it does. But basically, I tweaked these. I mean, if you read the captions that come up, it's pretty self-explanatory. But it's probably worth looking online and seeing if you can get some good examples, or looking at the documentation. So this is quite slow. There's quite a lot of points now. This is kind of at the point where I feel there's probably enough points to make this sort of production ready. And you can kind of see here the kind of fluid results. Let me switch this back to disks. It's a little bit hard to see because it's quite a subtle effect. So let me just reduce the points. Here's my delete. So I'm just going to delete most of the points. See if this speeds things up. You can kind of see it wants to maintain its edge, very similar to a fluid simulation. So I thought that looked pretty cool, so I've kept that in this PopNet. And I want to take that through and see if we can see it further down the line. I really like this kind of result. And I got to this point pretty much just trying different values here. Like I ended up turning off viscosity. Tensile radius is how much the particles actually want to push each other apart. So, but again, this is based on what I'm trying to get is to feel like the particles actually want to stick together. So the radius is pretty small. And then the particle separation for me seemed to be the biggest effector. So put this to 1. You'll see that the whole surface tension kind of look is just magnified. So the whole simulation wants to stick together. So it's basically choose the amount of points you feel like is a good number that you want to move forward with, so something that's renderable, and then adjust the particle separation based on that until you're still seeing the result, but it's at the level you want. In this case, that was this value for me at 200,000 points. So that's pretty cool. I ended up liking that one. Let me change this back. And I have a flipbook. Basically after the pop, I deleted any color less than 0.5 just to save even more space. So you see 44,000 and it was 75. So basically just saving some disk space. And this is the result. So the pop fluid effect is pretty subtle in this, and I could have gone more extreme, but I'm pretty happy with this. And you can see there the particles just stop sourcing at frame 70, which is fine. I've also set a different lifespan on each one of these, so I think it's like 2 and 3. And that's that. So if we look at the other one, I have the same thing. I have slightly different noise. Put in the same source stopping. And inside here, no different. So this is the basic one that we ended with last time. So nothing much to show there. So I'll show you the flipbook of this cache here. I really like this one. It is banding, so the source is still stepped quite a bit, but it kind of looks interesting. It kind of floats up, I guess because the volume might be lifting up slightly there, or not sure. But pretty happy with that one. And the last one, this was the one that has much more points. I went for a pretty rough noise here. That's changing very quick. And then what I did, just to try and make it even more different from the others, is I put down a wrangle and I said the Y position plus equals red. So I'm just adding this point color to the Y position. So as that noise moves around, the point cloud's going to move up and down, which will just alter the final advected particle result. Remove points as usual, this time quite a lot, so I'm getting my small pockets. Inside here, same. No changes there either. And the result is here. So with this one, I wanted to have very small sources that change quite quickly to get that sort of shooting, the shooting result. I mean, the way I picture it is in the portal, we might have quite a heavy base simulation of points to make the portal feel solid. And then I want these little flashes of highlights. So that's why I went down this kind of source for this one, to maybe use this render as a sort of little flashes of brighter points. So that's that. So you can see it's pretty much the same from where we left off, just with a few tweaks, and then basically experimenting and writing these out so I could show you guys. It didn't take too long. Let's have a look at our point count here. And obviously, I mean, we might come back and increase the number of points later on and rewrite these out. The moment is 2 million. $5 million, and yeah, sort of 400,000. So not too bad, and I feel like I'm managing it a bit by just removing anything in the source that we don't need. So I'm going to end this one here, and then basically we'll start to try and manipulate these sims now, and just see like how far we can take these base simulations that basically aren't really doing anything that we want from the portal, and try and sort of turn them into a portal, because I feel like comfortable that we have some interesting movement and we've got good like a good base to work from, but we need to somehow still turn this into a portal that opens and closes and everything else. And you'll also note that, I mean, up until now I've not used any sort of advanced techniques. This is all pretty basic stuff, and that's kind of the way I work. I mean, it's just finding the quickest way to get something, and as long as I have something that's usable, I can iterate on it later, and I think still use a bunch of interesting SOP tools to turn it into something that looks much more complicated than it is. And just finally, on the ROP, you can see I've used that expression that I put in the null on object level. So that's just ROPing out to the location I've set as cache into a folder called FX Portal, and that one's ROP will be, the file here will be the name of this ROP, like that. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Hi guys, welcome back. So I have made one small change since the previous video. Basically I'm going to start experimenting from just this first pop sim I had, and it's not that crazy, but the point count is just enough that it's getting extremely slow to try and edit attributes and stuff. So we're sitting at 2.2 million, and what I did is just delete points by expression at ID modulus 10. So I'm basically keeping every 10th point, and I've written that out. And I put down a switch here so I can switch between low res and up res basically. So I'll start experimenting with the low res one. So what I need to do now is try and make this sim look like a portal. So we have the points, and I drew that image before. We knew we wanted just some source in the middle to emit points outward, but what I need is essentially the gate that the character is going to move through. So that is the portal shape, which I defined earlier on based on the character's scale. So I have that, and I'm going to try and just do an attribute transfer. Now, attribute transfer is my favorite thing to use. It just gets so much done. The problem is it is quite slow. But let's just jump in with this. So what I'm doing is I'll take the points and I'll attribute transfer their position, match P. So right now all the points in that sim have been transferred to the position around the edge of the circle. And obviously we don't really want that, so let's blend that instead. And you can see that already gives us quite a cool effect. Let's try some different functions. I'll stick with the default one. So let's just have a look how this moves, because obviously I'm a big fan of just editing the sims afterwards. We could have tried to do this in the pop sim, but I mean, and we might do this later, but for now it's much quicker if we just take that simulation and see how we can manipulate that afterwards. So let's play. Still quite slow, but what I do want to do, and I might just flipbook this a little bit quickly, what I do want to do is make sure that it doesn't look fake. So we are transferring the position of the point, so that could easily look wrong, like it's not still flowing. So let me flipbook this and let's have a look at our reference. So basically I've already looked through a few of these, and I want something similar to this, where it's a pretty well defined exit basically of the portal that the character is going to jump through. So maybe I'll also try some SOP tools to kind of get this funneling, or this tube. but I'm not going for something like this. So I do want a kind of solid edge. That's enough for us to check. Yeah, so I think this is actually working really well. It's completely fake how we're updating the position, but it doesn't feel unnatural. It actually feels pretty good. So I'm happy with that. So I think we're safe to use the shape, our initial shape, and just basically try and transfer that position even onto some of our other sims. So for now, let's see what else we can do with this one. And just as a little recap, basically this whole effect is going to be based on this one volume sim. And then I've split that off into 3 particle sims. And then each one of those I can then split off into multiple sort of experiments and merge together what I like. So we can be pretty sure that everything's going to move in a similar way and naturally, and then just layer up all those different experiments into something that looks extremely complex, but it's actually not. It's all based on one sim. And I think that's a pretty powerful way to tackle magic in general, because you can sell the fact that it's magic if it's all moving smoothly and realistically based on that pyro sim. But it's all the combination of layers and of fine points or big flakes, and once you combine all that together it looks really complex. So let's try something else. What I can do is actually take our initial circle shape and scale it down, and then transfer the position. So obviously we don't want that, so I'm going to reference copy this and invert the transform. So no matter what value I choose here, after the attribute transfer it will always be the same size opening. And you can see we have the same settings, so let's go a bit bigger there. The same size opening, the same size blend width, but we're getting a slightly different reaction because the circle's smaller. So here's what we can do, and I'm going to use multiple transforms instead of one. It's easier to find our way back. So I'm going to arbitrarily rotate this in some other direction, and then we have this smaller one. Let's merge those together. Let's try some different angles here. So basically you can see how interesting this could start to look, because our base sim looks like that. And if we just did one manipulation, we'd get something like this. But you start to layer these up, and it gets really interesting looking. Let's try one more. I'll start with another transform. And this time exaggerate the sort of depth into the room, or the height between the floor and the ceiling. So let's see, scale that, maybe scale the whole thing up, scale this up a bit. So now these points are going to kind of shoot down into the room, and I'm going to, just to make sure it looks like the rest of the portal, put down a wrangle. and do kind of the same thing we were doing in the pop sims. I'll say if y is greater than 0, then y equals 0. So I'm not removing the points, I'll just keep them, but just flatten them down. And then you get this kind of, it's actually pretty cool as well. That's interesting. So I mean, what I'm trying to show is that without doing anything complicated, and this is the way I work because I'm not a technical person really, I consider myself just more of an artist. So I kind of do as much as I can with a more sort of simplified logic. So I could spend a long time trying to get this work in the sim, or I can just experiment with attribute transfers and wrangles and get really cool results, I think, outside of the sim. So we can merge this. Looks cool to me. So let's move on to one of the other sims. So this one I haven't done the same thing. To speed it up, it's actually not too bad, this one. I still really like the shapes. Oh, it gets slow down here. Let's see if we can just work with this. Right. So something I haven't done, and I'm going to do it on this one first quickly, because before I work on other experiments here, I need to define some colors or some ramps for the fall off. Because technically I don't want to have a look at this and see points that aren't supposed to exist anymore. So they're supposed to have died. We don't want to see them the moment they pop out of existence. So just start with this low res sim here. Put down a color swap. And let's ramp using age, because I know we have age. And get something that kind of fades off. So in this case, it's the other way around. I want the color to fade off based on age. And I can just refit this here. And that feels pretty good. So, and I'll base the alpha off of this color as well. So we have the point slowly disappearing and fully disappearing just before it actually dies. So that's cool. Let's just have it fade in as well. So a small fade in, and then let's make this blue. So I'm not spending too much time here on the color specifically. I'm just kind of doing a basic version of what I think I want to see, which is sort of the usual thing for me. We have the points being born, and I don't want to see that specifically, so I'll fade that in, and then it reaches a bright point, and then slowly fades off until it disappears. So a ramp like this is kind of usual for me, and then I can tweak it later on. One thing I do want to do is multiply that color by the color that we're getting from the sim. So we did have noise as our source. That's been simmed through the advection, so we're getting spots of white and then some darker areas as well. So that's probably the most interesting looking noise. So we just have a basic ramp here, and maybe let me switch to the higher point count so we can see it more clearly. That's the basic ramp based on age, and I'll take the second input and we say color will be multiplied by the point attrib of the second input, which in this case is 1. We want to take CD, which is from the switch basically, at ptnum, and then I think there's a float at the end. Yeah, I think that's right. That looks right. So that's good, and then I'll also add alpha at this point. So I'll do the same thing. Alpha is multiplied by the blue. So where it's brightest blue, it should be 1. Actually, I'm going to clamp this. So alpha equals the clamped value of blue between 0 and 1. So that looks good. So at this point the points are semi-transparent and they become more solid, and then they fade off in the alpha just before they die. And to visualize this a bit better, I usually use disks. It's just a bit softer in the viewport, but it's much slower. So I kind of like this. So now we get this all plugged in here. I'll switch back to the low res sim for now. Yeah, that looks good. So one thing I notice now is, I think obviously, put down our angle again. What we don't want is for all of these layers that we're merging together to sort of flatten out. So I need something as a highlight, and this being the smallest one and the one that's closer to being just the circle, I'm just going to multiply the color here. Check the high res. Yeah, so we just have now at least one of those sims with a slightly different color. Just a bit brighter around the middle. This is when I start to sort of get distracted and try other options here. So I don't want to spend too much time on this. So something like that, I'll carry on tweaking that later. But I mean, the general rule for me, and it's like I described in this ramp, is here we have the point of interest being the brightest point. And then we have that ramp falling off as it goes out. So I did need to at least take one of these networks and just really brighten it up to highlight that ring. Jumping over to this one, I'll do the same. I'm going to use a VOP this time. I'm still kind of getting to grips with trying to transition to wrangles, so I'm usually much more happy working in a VARP. So, but we'll do the same thing. This time I'll take age and I'll divide it by life. Put down a ramp. And put that into color. So here's our ramp here. So we have the same thing basically from light to dark. And because I've divided the two values, that will fall off perfectly from light to dark at the full range of the age. And then we want to multiply. In this way, it's actually quicker to do this in one. I could just multiply using the same input. So I have CD here. I can actually put a ramp down on this one as well. And I'll put down length. So I'm taking the luminosity of color. Call this something else. And multiply the age color by the original color. So here we can see we've got that interesting pattern that's coming from our source noise. And here I have a little control to kind of exaggerate how much of that noise is multiplying the ramp, which then you can play with stuff like this, get some interesting streaks. And actually I want this ramp to be color, and we'll just do another blue. So we have a blue color there, and then we multiply that. Let's try some quick shapes here. See how much detail you can get just by playing around. Right, that looks really cool. I'll leave that like that, and then I'll take the wrangle. So we don't need the second input, because all I want to copy from this wrangle is the alpha. So same thing, take alpha, multiply it by blue, and clamp that. And I've also just got an idea to remove some points, because I will be saving out each one of these again, and I'm working with quite a lot of points. So what I can do is I'll jump into this wrangle here and say if the alpha is less than some small value, then we'll remove the point. What's the syntax here? So remove the point at PT9. So remove that point that has an alpha less than 0.01. So let's just see if this is working. Yeah, so we can see points being removed, and So once we have that in place and we write this out, at least we're saving some disk space and some point count. So I'll copy that into this triangle as well. Yeah, that's removing a lot. I mean, I might not want to remove that much, but I'll leave that for now. Visualize disks. That doesn't look right. Aha. Yep, this looks really cool. I like this. So the difference is I just basically used a pop-up. I could have again done the same thing with a wrangle, and I've got a color based on age, and I'm multiplying that by the color from the sim, and I've put a ramp down for that so I can experiment and get different intensities in different areas. And then once again basing alpha off of that, and alpha is not 100% necessary at this point, but I like to visualize it the way I think it's going to be rendered. So I like to work through this and change settings, visualizing where transparent areas are going to be. So that's why I do that, and then I guess I can use the alpha attribute in the shader as well. Right, so what do we want to try and do with this? Let's take our circle. Actually, let's just transfer the position again. Start with that. So here we've got the same kind of setup. You can see the attribute transfers a bit slow. Same kind of setup, and then let's see if we can make that kind of tube kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Funnel. And I'll have some kind of tunnel moving up from the circle. So first thing comes to mind for me is, let's see what happens when we try and duplicate this up. So I just drop down duplicate, which is actually a copy and transform. And here I'll just not rotate, I'll move it up. So each copy goes up. That's a bit high. It's actually running pretty fast, so it's pretty easy to iterate and experiment here. Rotation for each one. Let's go a bit higher here. Maybe try scale it up. Just on Y, getting the kind of same effect we had on the other one. But in this case, for each copy, it's getting even more scaled in this direction. So that looks kind of cool. And we can even scale the whole thing down. Oh, I kind of like that. That looks super interesting. I would like to see this moving. It's a bit slow. I really like that. So I think this will work great. Like, I do want this portal to kind of warp up into the ceiling of the environment. So it can't be too narrow because the character has to drop down. I'll have to play around with these, but you can see how powerful even just that basic duplicate node can be when you have a good natural underlying sim. You get some amazing results. What I'm going to do is drop down another. Actually, I've got one here. We'll take this wrangle and I'll do the opposite. So I'll remove any points that come into the room and just keep the ones that are shooting off into the ceiling. Super cool. So let's I want to flipbook this, but it's gonna take a while, so I might pause and do that so we can look at it, and I'll come back to it. I am thinking what I need to do is, if I'm basing everything off of this attribute transfer, I can try and close the portal, because what we have now is we have this shape which just exists forever, and I have the particles dying at frame 70, I think it was. So at frame 70 they just do that. But right now I have these attribute transfers. So at frame 70, yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool, but I did want that portal to suddenly close after the character landed on the floor. So the portal to shrink into a singularity just before the particles stop emitting. So I'm going to animate this circle and we'll see how that looks. Maybe I'll flipbook that. So if this works, then basically we're safe, because everything that we decide to use the same method to force the portal to the shape will also handle the closing of the portal. So let's say from 55 to maybe just before 70. We scale down, and I always jump straight into the animation editor here, because what I would usually do, I'm guessing, would have it ramp something like this. So it slowly starts to shut and then quickly accelerates and closes. For now, let's just have a look at the default, see how it looks. So I'm going to flipbook this quickly, because this is where we need to get the timing right. Although we have made this fully procedural, so later on I can always change this transformation timing, and if I mean, all of our attribute transfers will be based on that. So I'm not too worried about moving on. Yes, I'm actually quite surprised that this feels still pretty natural. The points obviously move outwards as the circle is getting smaller because of that blend in the attribute transfer, but it feels kind of like they're being pushed outwards, so it still feels natural. So definitely a timing issue here. So I'll just make one tweak now. Once again, don't want to spend too long on that. So I'm going to change it to close at the same frame the particles stop. And I'm going to do it exponentially. I'll quickly do one more flipbook. Once I've done some experiments for each one of these, I'll probably flipbook each one using the high-res sim. So in the next video I can recap and we'll have something to watch. That feels a bit better. So it's still closing. It's closed for too long before the particles stop. Just a little bit. But I'm going to leave it like that for now, because I could spend ages tweaking that. But just so you know what my thought process is, it's just making it snappy. So I want the portal to slowly start to close and then to snap shut, and at that same moment feel like all the points have stopped sourcing. So you get this shut portal and this explosion of points outwards. So it's just a matter of tweaking the timing of that animation to get that feel. And so we've gotten a really cool result on this one. I'm really happy with this. So I'll definitely be flipbooking this so we can look at it in the next video. There's a lot of detail there. And let's quickly try something with the last sim before I stop this one. This was the one that, oh, we're lucky because there's much fewer points here, where I wanted it to feel like there were highlights that were shooting out. So it's got a very small noise and the points kind of come shooting out in small areas. So let's actually duplicate these two. I mean, once again, I can make changes for each of these, you know. I can try some different ramps here. Now I'm just playing around. But so that each layer has a slightly different effect. So that's cool, but I definitely want bright flashes. I think maybe I don't want to remove points from this one. Or I'll just brighten everything up. I'm just not happy with the way this one's visualizing. It looks cool, but I'm not seeing this bright color. So maybe I have a completely different age range on this one. I'm just going to throw a constant multiply in here. Because we're multiplying it by... No, we're not. So I should see this color update. There you go. Yeah, I mean, I want something extreme. I might have to adjust this when we're doing shading, but at least I can see it. Let me save. Okay. Now what can we do? Just thinking through this. So I've got the same closing system throughout, so that no matter which particle simulation I'm using will close based on the same animation, which is what I want. And I need something to define this ring, but maybe not for every one. So you see, if we look at this one, I have two of these sims constrained to the ring, and then I'm merging this one, which actually isn't. That doesn't have any constraint. So here I'll experiment with both as well. So let's take this circle and try something. I'm going to copy some lines. Oh, that's kind of interesting. That's not what I meant to do. I'm still not sure why this one's going up. I think it's just there's either a slight upward velocity in the pop sim, I can't remember, or it's the volume sim. So what I was thinking is I'll reduce the amount of points here with a resample, and then copy some lines. So we have these lines going outwards from the opening of the portal. I'll put a random scale here. Just based on PT. Between 0.5 and 2. And add some more points, because what I'm doing is actually transferring my sim to those lines now. That's freaky. So that's kind of cool. I'm going to actually merge the actual circle in with the lines as well. Yeah, so this could work, because what we have, and this follows the theme of the whole sci-fi thing, we want something at least slightly geometric, maybe visible, to kind of sell that it's technology and not some kind of natural magic. Let's just move this. What I want to do is, if we're going to merge this, I'm actually going to transform the sim down a little bit. Just so it'll fall underneath the other sims I have. Right, and then for the sake of having another layer, let's take the unattribute transferred version and merge it on top. I guess I should rotate this again. So I think this can work quite nicely because we have that shooting, we have those points shooting out, and now we have shooting lines as well. So constrained to those lines, we get some interesting shapes. Let's see if I can flipbook this one for us quickly. That's kind of cool. I like it. It's kind of interesting to see the points being attracted to something. Now I mustn't forget, because what I'm missing is the closing. I like that, but I mustn't forget that I have this closer anim here. I'll reference copy that and put it in all of these. Yeah, so that's good. I'll end this one here and carry on playing with it. I'll probably end up wrapping all of these out and flipbooking them. So in the next one we can see how they all look after my tweaks, and I'll do a recap of what I changed and I guess what I think the most important and powerful tools in this section of the network are for me. So see you then. Hi guys. So I have made a few tweaks, not much, and I've written out a RUP for each one of these streams we were working on before. So to quickly cover the changes, I actually didn't change anything on this stream here. Maybe just some slight changes to the blend width. So that's pretty much the same as the last version you saw. So here's the flipbook. So I could probably still work on the timing more of when the portal dissipates. But I'm relatively happy with this version for now. One thing I don't see as much as I was hoping to see is this is the sim that I used the new Pop Force Pop Fluid, and I'm not really seeing much of that, although maybe it would look very different if I hadn't used it. If I look very closely, there is some subtle fluid like surface tension style. But otherwise I'm pretty happy. I like the smaller details. So at the center here there's the more attribute transferred point cloud that's kind of closer in on the circle, and it sort of adds a higher detail area in the middle, which is perfect. So we're keeping that one. And if I go to the second one, I decided to remove points in this one also based on velocity. So I've added a second wrangle, and I've said if the length of the velocity is less than 2, and I checked the spreadsheet, then remove that point as well. So in that case, it's keeping it, you can see it's kind of, there's a few gaps. So if a point slows down enough, it'll disappear and then it might come back into existence. So I'm not 100% sure if that's going to work, but I kind of thought it might add something interesting. And then it also keeps some of the outside points that I was losing before. And this is the one I actually duplicate. So I guess here's the biggest difference is I've keyed this. So if I show you, what happens is at frame 10, it slowly goes from no duplicates and ramps up to 7 at frame 20. So there'll be just the one ring, and then it'll go exponentially up to 7. And at the same time, I'm also moving them up. So over time, using a similar ramp, the transformation value on Y is also increasing. And then what I've done is scaled it down on X and Z slightly, and scaled it up, which I did last time as well. And then we move the Y points minus Y to the origin, and I flip this out. So this is my first kind of attempt at an opening animation. We still need to deal with the actual, how the portal appears. We're kind of dealing with how it's closing, but this is the first attempt at trying to make a timing for the actual opening. So we still need to get rid of this first section, but at frame 10 basically we have this animation of this duplicate, which I think is pretty successful. So I like this. And then the last one, I think I just tweaked some of these values and the scale of the lines. So no big changes there, didn't animate anything. I didn't. I'm just scaling it up here. So like with this transform where I moved it down a bit, then after the transfer I'm actually just scaling this one up. So my thought process behind that is the opening of the portal is here, and we have everything adhering to the circle in the center over there. So if I want an element to feel more sci-fi, and so we have these lines, and like the duplicate version we have those very definite rings moving up, I might also have a horizontal ring moving outwards from the center. I don't know if you'll see it at the end, but I've just scaled the whole system up, and we'll see how it looks from there. Doesn't make much of a difference here. And this one, I like this, and I like the feel. It goes really crazy there because the sphere that has, the circle that has the lines copied to it is changing drastically when it scales down. But I don't really hate it. It's quite dynamic. So that's where we're at for now. And I think this is a good place to stop and let's say end week 1. There's a lot to play with here. We're in a pretty good state. There's lots of experimenting you can do between the volume sim, the particle sims, and then manipulating each one of those sims as well. So there's plenty to mess around with. And in the next week, we'll just have to figure out how the portal is actually going to animate to an opening state. And then we need to do some scene lighting, some shading, rendering, add some additional effects in the environment to help sell the portal's place in the environment. So it's going to be a bit more of a busy week, I think, than this week has been. But hopefully you're starting to see my general kind of approach and workflow, and my focus on making sure what I'm looking at is good and using the most simple tools available to me here to get there. So I'll see you guys in week 2. Hey guys, so I hope you enjoyed week 1, and let's just look at some of the places where you could put your own spin on this, or if you're looking at different reference, maybe try and incorporate that reference into your effect instead of just replicating exactly what I'm doing here. So there's no shortage of areas here where you could come up with a completely different looking effect than where we are at the moment. So for starters, just a reminder that this entire effect is based off of one volume sim. So changing the source of your volume from a sphere or having different velocities, messing around obviously in the volume DOP itself, will give you wildly different results once we get to the particle advection. So that's a good time to put a spin on the simulation that you think more closely matches something you've seen in some other reference. Obviously it could be something that's not a flat portal like the one we're going for over here. Not to mention then we've done basically already 3 variations on the particle advection. So lots of things to play with in there, and you saw we had one option where we used the pop fluid solver. That's one option, and there's a million other ways you could advect those points. You could possibly even use a force instead of using the velocity advection. And then not to mention plenty of room down here to tweak as well. So we've already come up with some pretty interesting results, I think, just by messing around with some of these SOP tools, something like this. So as I showed you during one of the videos, you could add a twist to this, you could deform it in a million other ways as well, and I would suggest you spend quite a bit of time experimenting with the standard Houdini deformers to try and see what you can get. Also, not to mention that the colors themselves are based on a very basic addition of color to the source. So you can go more or less sci-fi as well with these elements, depending on how you're sourcing color into the particles themselves. So it's at this point probably more than in week 2 where you can really affect the final look of our portal over here. So really, I encourage you to spend a lot of time experimenting and trying to see if you can push this in a completely different direction. So with that, I will see you guys in week 2.